Welcome to the Father Figure Formula. Create moments that matter.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Father Figure Formula Fireside Chat here. Today we have a very special guest in a Mr. Jameel Mayers here with Fathernetics. Obviously, in the father space as well, I'm sure you've had a lot of these conversations kind of coming through your pipeline on your channels. That's how I came across Fathernetics as well. So before we kind of get into some series of questions, maybe take a minute or two and just fill in the blanks here on who Jameel is and Fathernetics.
Wow, I may take the whole 55 minutes if you give it to me, but no, I'll try to trim it down a little
Sold.
bit. First of all, thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. I think that it is incredibly important to continue to provide these types of avenues for conversations for anyone, but more specifically dads, to be able to say, hey, I heard that somewhere. I'm not crazy. This dad's going through that. They feel the same way. Or, it's not generally to change anyone's mind. It's really just to kind of add some, right? Add a little bit here, add a little bit there, right? Take some, throw the rest away, whatever you want to do, as long as you have an outlet to kind of listen on the go. You're in the car, you're going to the grocery store, or you're trying to wrangle 5 kids at the same time. Maybe you can still listen to a podcast at the same time. But my name is Jameel Mayers. I am the host of Fathernetics podcast. And I started my podcast roughly about 8 months ago in May of this year, 2025. Wow, that number is tying me up already. But it focuses mostly on the LGBTQ community. As you know, most of the LGBTQ community is now starting to expand their families in the ways that some laws are allowing us to. So now the conversation comes front and center. How do we get there? What do we do? What does that look like as a dad? So it's less about how to raise, your 1, 2, or 3 kids that you do have now. And it's more about the adult, the mindset that you had before you started the journey, during the journey, and then what kind of human are you after the journey has been completed? Maybe there's a part 2, maybe there's a part 3, maybe there's remorse, buyer's remorse that we all have after we buy our brand new car. But I don't hear that much. But the gist of it is just conversation. Just, sit next to each other, chit chat, put it out there. And I think that's exactly what you're doing with your podcast. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Yeah, and I think it's the takeaways, right? And you kind of brought an interesting perspective of like the kind of before, the during, the after, right? And I would almost refer to that as like the transformation in a way, because you literally will go through a transformation. I don't think there's really anybody that I've talked to that's like, wow, okay, this is easy, just like the book I read, or it's never like that. So
Well, you hear about it all the time, right? Parents,
yeah,
before you become a parent, there's going to be a lot of changes, and everybody goes,
yeah,
yeah, I get it, I get it. And then after you start talking to dads and even some moms that have become parents, they're like, man, I had no idea. And we're like, well, we've been talking about it for the past 9 months, but yeah, I had no idea. So I like that we can continue to hear this. It's verbal instead of reading it. Literature sometimes is good, sometimes misses the emotion of that journey. Because I can tell you right now, the LGBTQ experience in becoming parents is a lot more involved. It's a lot
Mhm.
more what's the word I want to use? It's a lot more intentional. It requires 10,000 more steps than what we would call traditional, right? So
Mhm. You brought up the word intention. I'll probably come back to that again because I think that is super important. So let's kind of get into some questions. So like before Fathernetics, like before your podcast, like who are you as a dad, like on like your hardest days?
So, a little background, I have a 12-year-old son and I am married, pretty close to 22 years at this point. So, at the time that we decided, that journey to becoming a dad, it was quite the stairmaster, right? You think you started, but you really didn't. And ooh, we need to go here and we need to go there. So, who I was before I became a dad was a lot more easier because you didn't have I don't have to worry about my husband. He's a full grown adult. But my child now becomes an additional formula that you didn't really have to consider. So before having him, it was the get up and go was easier, right? The pivot on a dime was easier. The making decisions about where we're going to live was easier. I didn't have to think about school districts, which one's better, which one's worse. Didn't have to worry about that. So I think that becoming, or before I was a dad, if you will, um, was easier. Not that being a dad is terribly difficult. It's just an additional layer that I don't think anyone is really prepared for. But once you're in it, I mean, you fall in love with it rather quickly. So
Mm. And you kind of have to live it to believe it. I know that there's many people that I've talked to over time, and the idea of having a child, whether it is at the forefront or not, they just don't get it. And I think that's just, you have to live through experience, right? So,
like
it,
having an idea.
yeah,
You have the idea. I mean, you've thought about it, you've rounded that corner, you've got your spreadsheets, you got everything, right? But once you dip that toe in that water and you get that first, oh my God, this is really cold. No one can prepare you for that, right? And then you've got someone in your ear going, you just gotta jump in. That's how
mhm,
you and you're like, no, that's really cold. You just gotta jump in. So that's
right,
that's the way I frame it.
yeah. So what did fatherhood kind of teach you in year one that maybe kind of changed what you believed before?
So we did get Jacob when he was 4. So we did the foster to adopt through the state here
Mhm,
in Phoenix, Arizona,
mhm,
which was quite the experience. But year 1 for me is really year 4 for him.
mhm,
But that journey was, it's the growing to love your child because day 1, it's this is a human being which we've never met before, right? You don't instantly love someone you've met 30 seconds ago. But
mhm,
so it's really about him learning us and us learning him. And it's easier for us as adults to try to learn him than it is for him to learn us, right? So understanding his behaviors, what he likes, what he doesn't like, what he's reacting to, is that real? Is not real? Is he really just acting out because of, some previous issues and challenges that he's had that's put him in the system? Or is he pushing boundaries? Is he
mhm,
learning us that way? And all of those things are true at the same time.
mhm.
So I think year 1 for us was really learning how to change as human beings, right? As an adult, you think you've got it all figured out. You think you've become the person that you're going to be for the rest of your life. No, that's no. When you have kids, you realize that there's another 50 yards left to go that you left out there, and you're going to crawl all the way through that. And you become a better person because now you're more aware of the things you do. You're more aware of the things you say. You're more of the aware of the things you watch on TV, the friends you have. So I think that is all a growth experience that I think I'm still going through. I don't think that ever changes. It just gets different.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I always kind of say that I've become the man I always wanted to be after becoming a father. I always kind of thought who I wanted to be. And I think just some things obviously come in alignment, not maybe not always necessarily by choice because you're thrust into certain situations, right? So, and you kind of you learn to adapt, and you kind of mentioned being not necessarily the same person over time, right? So, what does your son do that kind of instantly reminds you like what actually really matters in life?
Oh wow. Okay. So I think that it's all in the little moments that happens. When he wakes up in the morning, looks at you and goes, "Hey, Dad." It's something that innocuous. It just kind of pulls you back into reality and says, "Hey, by the way, be in this moment." Instead of trying to check off the list that gets them out the door to school, right? I think we all get into our routines and sometimes we forget, hey, slow down, this is a moment. Or, that thing that you're doing over there where you're rushing your kid out the door is really creating a little bit more static. Here's a good example. I've heard this somewhere. If your kid is having a hard time getting out the door in the morning, it might be because you're not allowing them an extra 15 minutes of do nothing time. For an adult, that doesn't make sense, right? It's like these things need to happen in this order so that we can get out the door. I can get to work on time. I've got that conference call. But now you have to build that into your morning. So does that mean you wake them up 15 minutes early? Absolutely. So that they can bounce around the house for 15 minutes and feel good when it's time to leave. It just makes the experience better. So it's more of enjoy those moments. Maybe you sit with them on the couch and watch cartoons for 15 minutes. Maybe you sit with them at the breakfast table and just talk about nothing, because kids love to talk about nothing. Adults don't. And that's a learning journey for us too. It's like, I heard the story already. Well, you have to pretend like it's new. So let's hear it again. So those are the things that I think we all have to take stock in. I'm better at it now than I was before, but by no means am I good at it. And I think, again, that's another layer, right? We have to be okay just being good at things. We don't have to be perfect.
Yeah, I think the small moments, as you mentioned, are like the most rewarding. Because I think as being a father and like maybe thinking about what's going to happen as being a father, you think about all the big moments, but you don't really think about the little ones that tend to be the most rewarding, in my opinion. So it's interesting you brought that up.
Well, you know what? It's what they remember as well, right?
Yeah.
All the
Mm,
things you've choreographed and you've tried to prepare for, and you have this big plan about how things are going to unroll in the morning. That's great. But it's that one little thing that you took for granted. That's what they remember when they turn 32 and go, but that one day you didn't do A, B, C, and D. It's like, I didn't even think of that. That's that's the important thing.
mhm, mhm. So if your son described you to somebody today, what would you hope he says?
I'm Superman.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's me. I'm Superman. I think for kids, especially kids his age, parents are the world, right? Regardless of how they may seem at this age, I think 12 is the age where they start to kind of peel off ever so slightly. Hey, dad, we don't need to stand that close. I was playing with him just the other day. We were walking in public. I was like, you need to hold my hand. And he's like, no, I don't need to hold your hand. I was like, oh, remember when we actually did? And he's like, oh, I'm too old for that now. So it, you blink twice and these moments are gone.
Yeah.
I think living in the moment is ever so important, but he thinks the world of us, and we think the
Mm,
world of him as well. Granted, we all have our issues and our challenges that we're all working on as adults, as we relate to our kids, and we have those conversations as well, right? Hey, I'm trying here. I missed the mark. I didn't get it. And then we take, the time to apologize. That's harder to do as an adult, apologizing to a kid, because sometimes it can feel like, I don't need to do that. You're a kid, but he's a human, and in doing so we're also teaching good manners, good ways to apologize, why to apologize, how we apologize, and that we're never too big to do that. So teaching moments even when you're not teaching.
mm. That's very powerful. Yeah, especially when it's kind of ingrained in your lifestyle and your environment. It's super important to kind of pass on these teachings, right?
Well, that's
So
the intentional part
yeah,
as well, right? The
yeah,
LGBTQ community comes out of so much, I don't want to use the word the trauma, but things that were different, right?
mm,
I say we as a community, the royal we, right?
mhm,
May have grown up without the love and affection that we needed, or may have grown up with one parent or with no parents. There was a lot of hiding. There was a lot of, do we come out? Who do we talk to? Who do we not talk to? Shame and things of that nature. So, as adults now having kids, we have now the opportunity to change that narrative,
mm,
right? Now we can say, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to make sure these doors remain open. I want to make sure my kid gets to establish the foundations that they want to establish.
mm,
We provide the basics, and then we follow them wherever they take us.
mm. Love that. So I guess like let's maybe focus on a couple questions regarding kind of the adoption process. So what part of the adoption journey like forced you to kind of confront yourself and your situation about like the most? I mean, was this a discussion that you had ongoing with your husband for quite some time? Was this something that was it was a back and forth? Give me a little bit of insight into that.
So I think halfway through our relationship, we started the conversation about having kids. And it was always like, yeah, when the time comes, I'm down. Like we were both very interested in doing that. It wasn't pressing at the time. Now, when we relocated to Arizona, then the time presented itself. I brought it up again, and it was very much like, yeah, we're ready to do that. Now, part of what, inspired my journey to start my Fathernetics podcast is realizing that there weren't a lot of resources available to better understand what that process is, right? Tons of books out there, tons of, you search the web and you'll find it. when it comes to the straight path or the non-LGBTQ path, right? But for those that are in the community, the path can look different. The experiences can look different. The the feedback can look different. So I didn't see any of that to be able to say, hey, here's what to expect. Here are the questions to ask. Here are the responses that you may get that may shape the decisions on which direction to go in. So I wanted to create that, right? And be able to say, here are some individuals that have gone through the IVF journey, the surrogacy journey, the adoption journey, the fostering journey. Here are their stories. Here are their excited moments. Here are the challenges. Here's the reality of that process, right? Does it take 2 days and you're good to go? No. Is that what you're expecting? Maybe we need to change your expectations. Sometimes it takes years, right? So my journey was more that not the norm, right? We got licensed, we got introduced to Jacob probably within 4 months, and we've had him ever since. That's more of a fairy tale story of the foster to adopt process. Others have waited and have had multiple kids come in and out of their homes for years before they found the right match. And the foster to adopt journey is specifically designed to reunite the families. So you never know whether someone is going to complete what they need to do in order to earn their child back. I mean, that would be fantastic, right? You want children to be with their parents if it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't, and then they end up with someone else. So we just want to make sure things work out the best way that they can. We had a great experience, but we're also aware that that's not always the case.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up an interesting conversation around like obviously like choosing love versus obviously inheriting it. And you kind of brought up like the element of the child. They don't I guess they don't necessarily get a choice when they're that young. So I
Correct.
get
You're
yeah.
four, yeah, you don't get a choice. There for us, there was a bonding period of like, does this work? We got Jacob through a respite. So what that means is he was with a foster parent and they said, hey, we need this weekend because we have this particular situation or travel or whatnot. We can't leave the state with Jacob, so we need someone to watch him for the weekend. We raised our hands and said we were available for that. Um, so during that weekend, we spent 2 days with Jacob. He spent the night at our home, and we had an amazing time. The connection was there. So the following week, he got reassigned to us, and that he's been with us ever since. So I mean that was 8, almost 9 years ago.
Mm,
So that's what I mean. It was kind of serendipitous. That is the opportunity to say, do we have a good match? Are we understanding each other? Do things feel right?
mm,
Sometimes it can start out feeling right and then it sours. Sometimes it can start out really rough and then it's like, I love this kid, so we're gonna rock it until the wheels fall off, right?
mm,
It takes a very special heart to do foster to adopt in the first place,
mm,
right? Fostering is one thing, adopting is another. I kind of feel like adoption is more like here's the child that you have orchestrated. They're with you now. Go forth and conquer. Fostering
mm.
is like, I don't know whether they're gonna be with you or not. It could be years from now before all of a sudden they're not with you. So it's really, I mean, that heart has to be really big to do that. So my hat goes off to foster parents all over the world.
Yeah, and also I think like to kind of lead into maybe the next part of kind of like, the marriage partnership kind of modeling love element in the environments in the home, right? So after like 22 years together, what did kind of becoming dads really reveal about the relationship, maybe that you didn't expect?
You know what? I think we actually flourished, quite
Mm,
frankly. My husband and I have really good communication between each other. So it was kind of easy for us to align on what we wanted to do. We had decided earlier on we needed to strategize off screen, if you will, before we brought whatever we were bringing to our kid in a unified way.
mm,
Because if I said one thing, that needed to be the gold standard. And if he said something, that needed to be the gold standard. Now, obviously, unbeknownst to our child, the gold standard was arranged off screen, right? We both decided this is what it was going to be.
yeah.
So, you know, it, it helped for those circumstances where your kid often comes to one parent and goes, "Hey, can I this?" And then you get a no, and then they sneak over to the other one and go, "Hey, can I do that?" And the other person goes, "Yes," and now you've got a conflict. So it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So granted, it wasn't perfect, um, but I think it helped greatly that we had decided we needed to be on the same page
Mm,
about most things, and we leaned into our strengths, right?
mm,
Some of us are more planners, some of us are more fun, some of us are more strategic, some of us are, they're the ones you go to for this. And my kid learned real early. You go to this parent for that, and you go to that parent for that. I think they're like reading us like books, right? Before we
yeah.
even know that they've done it, it's done. Like they pay
Yeah.
attention to so much. I think we take that for granted as well. Kids
Yeah.
absorb it all.
For sure. And I guess like when you and your husband disagree as parents, I guess like what keeps you aligned if there's been a situation that you maybe haven't come across or had this preset of communication.
So I think you have to be okay not always having the right answers.
Mm,
I think that helps in the moment. If I wanted to go left and he wanted to go right, but he made a decision to go right, let's go right. Unless it's something that's like way off, which is something that would have come up, right?
mm,
In the moment, if we're not unsure, then it's always a we'll get back to you kind of a situation.
mm,
But unless you're comfortable knowing that you're not going to get it right the first time or the second time or the third time, it could produce a lot of challenges, right? Where you get a lot of static in between the two parents. And I've seen it, right? And I think a lot of conversations like this podcast, my podcast, will normalize that. You're
mm.
not supposed to get it right. You're supposed to be nimble enough to be able to say, I started down this path, but you know what? That doesn't work. So I need to
Yeah.
backtrack and go the other direction. Your kid will love you for it. They'll be able to see that you're able to change your mind, grow, make decisions in one direction, and be wrong and be okay with that. Um, if all they see is the perfection side of it, then you're going to have quite the interesting teenager.
Yeah, and I think the element of like letting them see you apologize is so powerful. And take accountability. Like we bring up accountability a lot and trying to teach the kids accountability, right? And I think that's such a human trait that unfortunately tends to be lacking in a lot of areas these days is the accountability element. So
Well, they emulate everything, right? So they learn
yeah.
seeing others do it, especially in the age of like YouTube today.
Mhm,
They pick up a lot of interesting habits because they've seen others do it and think it's cool, right?
mhm,
Well, right now, while they're young, parents are the cool ones. So we need to be emulating that. So if you're unwilling to sit your kid down and apologize, hey, yesterday I raised my voice. That wasn't a cool thing to do. I want to apologize. Let's talk about why I did that and what happened and what I was trying to get you to do. Right. That helps for a month down the road when they do something and now they need to come and apologize. You can't expect them to do it and they don't know how to do it because you're not teaching them
yeah,
how to do it. So we have a lot of expectations for our kids, but we fail to understand that those expectations they have of us as well.
mhm. Reciprocated for sure. So maybe like what's one hard conversation you're grateful you didn't avoid for your son's sake?
The sex talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is I've had this conversation on my podcast before. It
Mhm.
is important that we get ahead of stuff like that. I know it's a hard
Yeah.
conversation only because it's uncomfortable, right? You're only used to having those kind of conversations with adults. Sometimes it's playful, sometimes it's with your partner, so it's a more serious conversation. I think it's important to be able to have these conversations in a very age appropriate way with your kid because if you don't, right, you decide not to, someone else is going to have that conversation with them. It's usually one of their friends, which is the same age, and they're going to provide the wrong information about something that doesn't exist or that is unnatural. The expectations are unreal. So it requires an intentional effort of raising, in my case, a young man that has a respect that's necessary to talk about I have my first girlfriend. Okay, what does that look like? What does that mean to you? What does respect look like? What does consent look like? Obviously, we're not talking about having sex at his age, but consent is still a thing, right?
Mhm.
Holding hands requires consent, right? It's
Mhm.
that simple. It starts there. But if you're unwilling to have those conversations and just brush it off, oh, you have a girlfriend, that's cute, and move on, what'd you just do?
Mhm.
No, that's impactful. So I'm glad that we've had that conversation. We have a very open household where we can have those type of conversations. Hey, Dad, I was thinking about A, B, C, and D. What do you think about that? It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's like, wow, I didn't even know that was like in your lexicon. Like, where'd that come from? But okay, let's have the conversation. So I think we should all embrace it and not show it on your face. You're surprised that they brought it up. Just
Yeah.
run right into it.
Yeah. Communication is literally the backbone of every relationship, so it's got to be at the forefront for sure.
And it's underrated. We can't all do
Yeah.
it correctly.
Yeah.
I've learned how to do it through the years. I'm blessed to have a husband who's pretty good at it as well, but that's not always how it ends up. So we have to be willing to say, I thought I knew it. I need to learn more about that.
Yeah. And communication literally is a skill. It's like a tool that you can sharpen and you kind of have to keep working at it. So yeah, 100%. Let's maybe kind of talk about why Fathernetics exists, right? Like, and you were kind of mentioning this before that you maybe didn't necessarily see the resources um, or kind of the context for the LGBTQ community revolving around fatherhood. So, what were you particularly seeing that felt kind of like maybe invisible or like misunderstood?
So, what I have been learning is part of that question, right? In my conversations with the audience, the IVF journey, the surrogacy journey, the private adoption journey has been such an eye opening experience for me. I think when we were looking to expand our family, we dabbled in it, right? We said, okay, should we look into adopting from a different country? What does that look like? We looked into some of the legalities of it and we were like, wow, that is interesting. That's crazy. That's wild. But there was no channel to say, but if you're LGBTQ, here's the off ramp. That you can't go that way. You have to go this way, right? It's not that black and white until you get into it and you're like, oh, I wish someone had said something. I wish someone had written this down. I wish I had heard someone say, do it this way, not that way, because of A, B, C, and D. So Fathernetics at its core dives into the costs of surrogacy. What goes into that? How many steps? How many organizations are out there to help you through that process at no cost? How many are out there to help you? And there's a premium, right? There are lawyers that are involved. There are countries that you shouldn't even entertain for such activities, and here's why. And then there are some countries that are very welcoming to say, we do this right. We do this in a way that humanizes everyone who is participating. We do it in a way that supports you being the parent of record, right? We do it in a way that is supporting of the LGBTQ community, so you don't get into a space where you started out being happy and now you're not because now you're connected to someone that's like, I don't believe in your lifestyle, if they call it lifestyle, right? So I think all of that is important. But above it all, it's really about understanding the journey. You started out this way. You have that father je ne sais quoi, right? How did you get that? Where did you get the strength to be a dad? Did your dad teach you how to do that? Did your grandfather? Did your uncle? Was there a coach somewhere? In a lot of cases, it's mom who's raising a kid on their own, who's interjecting a lot of the fatherhood qualities that they now possess today that have made them the humans that they are today, that now they can pass on to their kids. That part of the story is often never told. We want to know about the kids, how cute they are, and they are. But what about that transformation, right? You went from an adult to a dad. That is a change. And I think a lot of people don't shine a light on that often enough.
Yeah, and you hear a lot about people saying, well, they're acting the opposite of what they kind of were parented in a way, right? They align with something that they know was a positive pathway forward, or they do the complete opposite. And like you kind of mentioned, break a cycle, right? And
Yeah,
I
well,
think,
you
yeah,
know all the things you know all the experiences you don't want to pass
yeah,
on, right? I
yeah.
didn't like that, so cut it out. Or I did love that, so now I'm going to go big on that, right? We're overcorrecting in some areas, and then we're being very intentional in some of the things, right? Dad wasn't emotional with me, so now I feel like I wasn't included. So now I'm going to shower my kid with all the emotion that I can possibly do, right? Granted, that's not always an easy thing to do, but when you're intentional about certain things and you kind of step out of your shell a lot easier and say,
Mhm.
this is what I'm going to do to avoid my kid coming up in the closet because they thought one thing or another, right? Because I didn't say something. I felt it was
Mhm.
okay, but I didn't say it, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
like the I am proud of you moment. I knew my dad was proud of me, but he never said it. That's the kind of thing a lot of people want to change. It's like
Yeah.
hearing is different than just thinking it.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's like a lot of stories, like a lot of costs involved, like that. I know you kind of talked about the financial element of like maybe not having that support or resources information, but like what other costs are there involved? Like there's a lot of emotional costs. There's, I mean, just the humanality costs. Like, I mean, you don't maybe have to go into distinct detail, but like what are some other stories that you're kind of coming across that people have run into?
So, depending on the country and the process, right, there is a cost for all of the steps. One, there's a cost for needing to provide the human material that makes kids, right? That's the
Mm.
donation of the sperm to a sperm agency. There's the genetic testing that goes into that for making sure that you don't have any issues. There's the search for a surrogacy. There is, either a surrogate or you can do IVF, right? And then there's the whole pregnancy and going through, attorneys and making sure you get documentation. The cost can be anywhere from 100 to $200,000 per child, and that number always scares me every time I'm hearing that because who's just sitting on that? You want to expand your family, you need $200,000 to start. So it's like it's mind-boggling unless you're independently wealthy, it's mind-boggling. It's like how do you get there? And it's really baby steps over the course of 2, maybe 3 years, right? You got to start somewhere, you got to put money together, you got to start with step A. And this podcast shows you don't need the entire 300,000 now, right? Start with the
Mm.
50,000 that maybe you have to borrow. I don't know. Maybe you borrow the entire amount and pay it back. Maybe that's a hardship because paying back $300,000 loan after you have a kid that costs just as much, right? It's like, does that make sense? Does it not make sense? Whatever meets the need of that family, because everybody does it different, is where it's at. And as you mentioned correctly, there is an emotional toll, right? There are those that start the journey and biologically they lose, a step, they lose the child, there's a miscarriage, they cannot conceive, or they had a match with the surrogate that decided no at the last minute, not interested, or there are all sorts of stories out there. How do you become ready for that if you haven't heard what could happen, right? Give me the good, bad, and the ugly so I can be ready for it. And I think this podcast helps with that as well.
Amazing. Yeah, different conversations I think are a must, and resources. How can you educate yourself for sure? Because a lot of these things people maybe haven't even necessarily thought of. So I think
I didn't.
definitely, yeah, yeah.
I,
Speaking
my
from
my journey is
experience,
a
yeah.
lot different. There was no financial cost to it. Foster to adopt is all covered by the state,
Mm.
um, including monthly stipends that you get from the state, and the fact that they get to go to a university within the state at no cost when the time comes. Right? If should they decide to do that, every other process requires some sort of financial investment, which is very, 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 very different than a traditional pregnancy, right? Um, You wake up and you're pregnant. Congratulations. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the LGBTQ journey is a lot more intensive and a lot more involved and just requires, two extra pennies here and there.
Mm. So which conversation on Fathernetics maybe like changed how you show up as a father?
Wow. I would say, episode number 2 of Fathernetics is the one with my husband. I think that one, even now after so long, continues to shape the way that I see fatherhood because it's
Mm.
different. You think of yourself as being a great father, and I am, and most people are, right? But when you hear that from a third party or someone who is looking in from the outside, it either helps to reassure that, hey, I'm on the right path, or it helps to expand your awareness of what you're doing. I think one of the things that Nicholas, my husband, had mentioned on that podcast was in order for us to be successful with our child, there are other parents who needed to fail,
Mm.
right? Because that's the whole fostering process, because the goal is reunification, right? So
Mm.
if they're not able to get it together, then we get to adopt the child. And that's a very unique way of looking at it, but it's a very human way
Mm.
of looking at it because you don't want you're not over here praying for people to fail, right? But you want that child to have a very successful existence. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. So that expanded again, added another floor because I never thought about it that way until he said it.
Yeah.
They added another level, another floor to my mindset. So each conversation that I have on Fathernetics is always like, I thought I knew everything, and then they drop some detail in there that's like, where did that come from? And I think that's the awesome part about just having conversations.
Mm. Yeah, I was kind of mentioning before, just that one kind of takeaway, right? And I feel like that most of the time this is like more than one, but it's sometimes those little details are so powerful from how we perceive it on a case by case basis, right? It might just could take on a completely different meaning,
The devil's in the details, as they say.
right? Yeah. Okay, so like let's maybe kind of switch gears a little bit to the broader kind of fatherhood community. Like, where do you think most fathers are like quietly struggling right now?
Engagement. I think that historically speaking, men have had a hard time talking to other men about what they're going through in life in general. Now, when it comes to fatherhood, I think what has been missing is the ability to call ourselves out and say, hey, that thing that you're doing over there as a dad, that's not it. Like you're missing the mark. Um, that yelling that you're doing in the grocery store with your kid and embarrassing them, that's not it. That's your kid is feeling a certain type of way, but you're showing yourself as being, emotionally immature, and perhaps missing some key marks, right? Unwilling to expand your own human nature to be a better parent. I think that's what's missing, the approval that says, yes, hear it and do something about it, as opposed to being offended that someone has said, hey, that might not be it.
That brings it back to the accountability talk again, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
The self-awareness. Yeah, to be able to have these conversations, not only with
And I think
others, but yourself, right? Yeah.
that's where don't tell me how to raise my kid comes from, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Don't tell me. So we
yeah,
stay in our lanes. We see that over there, and we're like, we can't get into that. And oftentimes, that's the right
yeah,
decision. You don't need to insert yourself into everybody's business.
yeah.
But when you have friends that you call friends, they're in your lives, they're trusted, and they're parents as well, and you're a parent as well, or maybe in a position where you can comment on parenting, right?
Mhm.
Because oftentimes, if you're not a parent, you might not be in a position to have anything to say about anything. But you can comment on the human quality of being a parent, right? Hey, that thing that I saw you do the other day, let's talk about where that comes from. Why did you do it that way as opposed to any other way? It's more of a conversation. Invite me. to understand the strategy that you are employing with your kid, as opposed to, hey, you're wrong, don't do it that way, you're a bad person. Nobody listens to that, right?
Yeah.
It's you have to be emotionally intelligent enough to know how to engage someone about what they're doing.
Yeah, not just point out maybe the problems, but like we need to be talking about some solutions here. Um, yeah, important conversations to have. So again, okay, so if we're like stripping away everything regarding like stereotypes, family dynamics, environments, like what does good fathering look like to you?
Showing up.
Mm,
That's it. Showing up. Everything else is important. But if you don't show up, then everything that you do means nothing,
mm,
right? Just show up. Be there. You're there when they get home from school, if you can, right? You're there for dinner, right? You're there on the weekend if they play sports, you're there at their games as best as you can, right? You're at the recital, right? You're showing up to band. Yeah, the band sounds atrocious, but you know what? You're in row five going, that's my kid. I see all these videos about the kids who are in band. These they're like 6, 7, 8, and they're standing and you can see them, they're scanning for their parents, and they're like, they're I don't see them. And as soon as they see dad, they're like, right?
yeah,
Showing
yeah,
and they remember that. They don't remember how horrible the horn section was. They remember that dad or mom, in some cases, was present. They were there to
mm,
wave the flag or put up the sign or do that embarrassing thing that they always do, right? They remember that. So it's just really showing up. Don't have to be perfect. You didn't get it right the third or fourth or fifth time, but you showed up.
yeah, and even like that sense of security when they see you, when they're on stage and they see you and you're there. There's that sense of kind of security that it's not even necessarily like you need to be doing anything. You just show up and you're there, and that
You see the
provides that.
shoulders relax.
Yeah,
They're like, okay, I see dad.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not here by myself.
yeah,
We're here. Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
100%. So if you had to choose between maybe three options here, I like my alliteration. So do kids need more protection, presence, or permission to be themselves?
Oh, that was a good one. I would go with they need more presence. I think presence allows for them to observe you as a parent. And from that, they get all the permission they need to be themselves,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
Because no one should ever need permission to be
mhm.
themselves. If they feel like they need permission to be themselves, it's because they've observed something from you that says, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And that comes from, for me, it comes from hearing all the stories about why people stayed in the closet as long as they did, or felt like they couldn't reach out and talk to their parents about A, B, C, and D because they saw or heard or misunderstood something that made them feel like you can't go there, you can't be yourself, you need permission. So a lot of the coming out exercise is, I don't need permission, I'm going to be myself, which I love. In some cases, it's coming out to someone who then says, I love you anyway. And then they get the permission that they need. Right. But they
Mhm,
only needed it because they felt that you weren't going to give it.
mhm,
Right. So I think if you're present, they get to see you, they get to understand you, they get to absorb a lot of that from you without you ever needing to do it.
mm. Leading with presence by example for sure.
Yeah, I drop a little knowledge and wisdom every now and again.
A few pieces of knowledge here for sure. Okay, so we'll get
I
down.
play a
Yeah,
doctor on TV.
yeah. So we'll get down to the last few questions here because again, I want to be respectful of your time. So, like, what's maybe one small change that like radically improve your relationship with your son? And I know you can kind of go back to presence again, but maybe even with that presence, because I know in the father figure formula, we're like intention with that presence is a big thing. So, what's maybe a might have been a small change, but resulted in maybe a bigger impact?
What I would say is, I think asking yourself that question every day is the change, the small change that one should have, right? If you've ever thought that you've had it all figured out and there's nothing else you need to do but exactly what you're doing, you failed. And the reason I say that is because I do ask myself that every day. Now, am I successful at it every day? Absolutely not. But I do ask, right? Because there are things that I do that I'm like, you know what? If I weren't as strict as I was in that area, what would happen? And every now and again, I will test myself and say, maybe I'll just leave that alone and stop griping about that and notice the change in the individual, right? Because they're vibing off of you. If you're chasing them about something, then it's always on their mind. They may get it right, they may not get it right. But if you stop chasing them about it, you might be surprised.
And let's maybe kind of add on that for a second, because I think you're picking up on maybe you're maybe missing the mark a little bit, and you're and by doing so, you're potentially like repairing the moment, right?
Right. So I think missing the mark is part of the journey.
Mm,
And because we're never going to get it right 100% of the time, you have to be able to say, hey, I've been missing the mark for the last 6 months, because a lot of us won't catch it right away unless there's someone next to you going, hey, by the way, you missed that. So sometimes it may take 6 months, and you look back at the trail behind you and you go, oh man, I need to fix that. So
mm,
accountability, the ability to apologize to yourself, and the opportunity to give yourself approval to make that change.
mm.
Because a lot of people get bogged down in, I decided to go this way, I can't change. That's
Yeah,
not true. You can
yeah,
change. Go a different path. Change it up.
for sure. So I guess, like, what kind of fathers do you hope communities like Fathernetics and Father Figure Formula like help shape?
Just parents that are aware. Like I said at the beginning of your podcast, I don't want anyone to feel like we are trying to change their minds about how to be parents. We're in no way saying we're here to teach you how to be a better dad. That's not the goal. The goal is to make you aware, to give you information, to allow for you to listen and pick up things that allow for you to decide if you want to change. Do you want to add this to your arsenal? Do you recognize this as something that you don't want to add to your arsenal? Cool. So take a little bit, take none of it, take some of it. It's up to you. Conversations for you to listen to and plug in, unplug. Just listen, show up, have a seat, leave when we're done.
Mm. But always a seat at the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If ever it comes across as, hey, you're doing something wrong, you need to do it my way, we've missed the mark, because my way isn't always the right way, but it is a way. Build off of my way and make your own way.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Because every kid is different. Just when you think you've got them figured out, they change on you. So there will
Mhm.
never be a perfect way.
100%. So I guess my kind of last question is, we've kind of coined this term, the father mark, which is like legacy, right? You're leaving a father mark on your children. And essentially, if you were to look at this as a 20 years from now, and you were to leave a father mark on your son, what would that look like?
So my father mark is Fathernetics, right? So it is the name itself, right? Talks about the genetics, right? That comes along with fatherhood. There's the DNA component for most, right? Fathernetics is also a play on kinetics, right? It's that energy, that information, right? Because energy is information, right? So what I got from my dad and I'm using or not using, I am now passing down to my child, and he's going to end up using or not using. But now he has a reference with this podcast for, the next 50 years that I have it up and running, God willing, right? To be able to look back and go, hey, dad used to have these conversations with all these amazing people and has built this community of people who have felt the ability to grow and expand off of that, and with other podcasters like yourself, this is not a competition. And I've said that so many times. I am not competing with other podcasters about, who's got the better ratings and who's going to be more. You are now part of my community, and hopefully I am part of your community. The goal is to uplift and to all grow at the same time. What do they say? All tides raise all ships. Something like that. That is my goal. I have that at the core of my being. I want everyone to be successful, all the dads to be successful. And if that means we all have to grow and be giant in the space at the same time, cool. Does that mean I get, maybe slightly left behind and someone else is more successful first? Sure. We all get wrapped up in the numbers. I do too. But that's not the ultimate goal. I am most happy when I end an episode and feel good that someone has shared their story.
And I always say all boats will float, right? It
There
is
you go.
literally, yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, I feel like I dug into this because it's something that I'm very passionate about and something that is a lifelong journey, right?
Right. Because
Yeah.
where you are in your journey today is based on how old your kids are. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so is mine. My kid's 12. So I'm looking back going, yeah, I was there. But now
Hmm.
I've got another 5 years of teenage angst ahead of me that I have no clue what's coming. So hopefully somebody
Well,
else will share it with me.
exactly, right. I'm sure it'll be come up with a few more conversations, but okay. Well, let's take a minute here for you to kind of do a plug on Fathernetics.
So again, Fathernetics is a podcast designed to understand the roots of our fatherhood energy, right? Where we get our greatest instincts from, where the intentionality of who we are today, resides, and how we want to make that indelible, is that the right word? Mark on our kids, on our community, on our future, right? We're trying to build and change what we see. I use this example all the time. Congress today has all the kind of kids that we are trying to remake with the intentionality that parents have today. There are some great people there, but we have a lot of individuals who perhaps needed a lot more hugs in the world.
Mm.
Um, so our kids, when they grow up, are building the future. And I know they used to say that about kids in the past, but we're in a day and age today where with social media and our ability to connect and talk and hear stories instantly, I think that provides such an opportunity to provide, information and insight and community at such a faster pace. We're just going to thrive.
Mm. Love it. Jameel, again, I really appreciate you and your time, and I respect what you're doing at Fathernetics. This is information that needs to get out there. And again, we are in a day and age where it is traveling that much faster, and it'll probably get even faster if that's possible. But regardless, again, I think it's super important to have these conversations, and I really thank you again for coming on.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.